the biggest obstacle to getting what we really want in our lives, in our careers, in our business is ourselves. Hi everyone, I'm Tony Vlahos, Chief Marketing Officer of ExecuNet, and I'm speaking today with William Ury. And he's a co-author of Getting to Yes, the world's best-selling negotiation book, and he's the author of a new book, Getting to Yes with Yourself. The new book doesn't come out until January, but say you'll get a good dose of Bill to carry you over until then. And by all means, feel free to pre-order. So, Bill, hi.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So, tell me, why did you write Getting to Yes with Yourself?
Well, it's interesting, Tony. I've been in this field for 35 years of negotiation, helping people get to yes. And getting to yes, introduced a new way of thinking about negotiation, shifting from kind of a win-lose adversarial kind of negotiation to can we work together, can we get to what we sometimes is called a win-win, a solution that works for both sides. And then over the years I realized, people have a lot of difficulty with that. So I wrote a book about how do you deal with difficult people and difficult situations, getting past no. But then it kind of dawned on me over the years that actually maybe the most difficult person we have to deal with in negotiation is the person we look at in the mirror every day, which is ourselves. Because it's in our own human tendency to react, to act without thinking. Because I'm in these negotiations and I see us acting in ways that go exactly contrary to what our interests are. We get angry. There's a saying that when angry you will make the best speech you ever regret. Or out of fear, we give in when we ought not to be giving in. And so I've been thinking about that for a long time, and I realized that it's time not just for a new way of negotiation, it's a new way of thinking about getting to yes itself, which actually incorporates both the inner, negotiating with ourselves, getting to yes with ourselves, and the outer, getting to yes with the other. In fact, what I found that if you really want to change the game with the other side, you have to begin by changing the game with yourself.
We say things about ourselves, to ourselves, like, I'm my own worst enemy, and I need to get out of my own way. Is that what inspired this book? And it's a really hard thing to do, isn't it?
That's it. It's funny because, I often ask business leaders, what's more difficult for you? The external negotiations you engage in with clients and suppliers and so on, or the internal negotiations inside the organization with your colleagues, bosses, employees, boards, and so on. And I've asked this question hundreds of times, and I would say at least 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the hands go up and say it's the internal negotiations that are more difficult than the external, with people with whom you're on the same team. Well, what's more internal than the negotiation inside yourself? And of course that is the most difficult, the most challenging, because we've got blind spots, we don't see it, and we get in our own way. And if we can get out of our own way, if we can do a little bit of that inner homework, then the results both in satisfaction and in agreements, to me, are enormous.
Extraordinary. So the book, and we're not going to go over every one of these wonderful proven steps, but there are essentially 6 proven steps that you cover, and they are intended to dramatically improve outcomes, right, in all aspects of our work and life. And the first is putting ourselves in our own shoes. What is the main idea there?
Well, it sounds funny because, aren't we already in our own shoes?
Sure.
But, in negotiation, countless times, when people ask me, what's the single most important skill for a negotiator, I'd say if I had to pick just one, I'd say it's the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes, whether it's the customer, your business partner, whoever it is, put yourself in their shoes, understand the way they see things, because after all, negotiation is an exercise in influence. You're trying to change the other side's mind. How can we possibly change their mind if we don't know where their mind is? And then I realized, it's really hard for people to do that. It's easy to say, put yourself in the other person's shoes, walk in their other moccasins, but it's really hard to do it. And what makes it hard to do it is that our minds are so full of thoughts, emotions, worries about our things. We don't have any mental space to be able to take in the other side to really understand where they're coming from. So then I realized maybe the psychological antecedent to putting yourself in their shoes is you first have got to put yourself in your own shoes. In other words, before listening to the other, maybe you got to listen to yourself and clear that mind a little bit so that you can have the clarity both to know what is it that you really want. It's not just about what the other side really wants. I'll give you an example. I was invited last year to help a very wealthy entrepreneur who set up the largest retailer in Latin America. He was in a gigantic fight with someone to whom he had sold control of his company. It was a French entrepreneur. I mean, they'd been going for 2.5 years fighting over control of this company, and he was 76. He was going to be chairman of the board for another 8 years. They were using every law firm to fight each other. It was hugely public. The Financial Times called it the biggest cross-continental boardroom showdown in recent history.
Oh my goodness!
So it was, the stakes were huge. And so this guy asked me to help him, so I went over to his home and I sat with him and I said, his name was Abilio, and I said, Abilio, you're a guy who got everything. What do you want here? What do you most want here? He said, well, I want my, stock at a certain price, and I want elimination of the non-compete clause, and I want the company headquarters, and he rattled off a whole list of things. And then I was listening, and I said, but Abilio, you've got everything you want. I mean, you can never spend all the money you've got, and you've got a new family, and what is it that you really want? So we kind of probed for a while, and then he finally said, you know what I want? I want freedom. I want my freedom. And I said, so Abilio, what does freedom mean to you? And he said, well, it's freedom to spend time with my family for one thing, and he pointed to his young kids and so on. And it's freedom to pursue my business dreams. So once, that was like, aha, because once he had put himself in his own shoes, understood what he really wanted, then the conflict, as difficult as it was with the other side, became, much easier.
Sure.
And within, this conflict went on for 2.5 years, and within 4 days, we were able to bring both men to an agreement that it wasn't just one of these grudging kind of, okay, I'll get it over with. They were both highly satisfied with the agreement, really satisfied. And it gave him the freedom that he most wanted to go on with his life. And he's a happy man. He said that was the beginning of the rest of my life. I mean, it was really the best thing that could have happened to him. So to me, it just underscores this point that the real negotiation starts right here.
Yeah, yeah. And the book is rich with these examples and these stories. And another, I think, highly relevant example that you provide in the section of the book around standing in your own shoes is this one of, we all know what our position is. So we want, for example, a raise. But tell me the difference between knowing your position and knowing what your interest is.
Yeah, so much of negotiation is all around positions, which are the kind of the concrete terms. It's the dollars and cents, it's the terms and conditions. In the case of a raise, it's the number. That's the position. Underlying the position, however, is what really motivates you to take that position. What we call this your underlying interests, your concerns, your needs, your aspirations. I want recognition. I, have got a family health crisis. I want to put my kids to college. Whatever it is, those are the underlying interests of why, someone else got a raise. I don't feel it was fair. If you can put the spotlight, positions, it's okay. Look, I'm asking for this. Well, there's no money in the budget. End of conversation. But wait a minute, you want recognition? Well, we have some budgetary problems, but we can give you a new title. We can maybe get you a tuition loan program. You can be creative, and so instead of like treating it as a fixed pie, where you can kind of expand the pie. So you actually, if you can solve both sides' problems, you can solve the budget problem and you can solve the employee's problem. And to me, that's the key in negotiation. And the thing again there that I found is, it's so often, even though people get that conceptually, they find it hard to do because our mindset kind of goes to scarcity. There's not enough. You go into a negotiation, there's not going to be enough for me and for you. And so we've got to change that internal mindset of scarcity and find out that, in fact, there's going to be enough for everybody. And that's the shift that needs to take place. So it all begins, every one of the outer shifts that needs to take place in the negotiation has an inner kind of analog, and we've sort of forgotten that inner analog. And so the book, to me, it's about, I realize that we've been negotiating with one arm tied behind our back. because we've just been focusing on outer techniques. But we got to draw on our inner resources so that we got both arms and we can really be most effective in our negotiations.
Extraordinary. And this relates to another step that you cover in detail in the book, which is reframing your picture. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Sure, because it's how do you change the game? You change the frame. In other words, you change the frame from, you and I are on opposite sides of a table, glaring across the table, engaged in a face-to-face confrontation, or you and I are side by side, jointly attacking the problem. So, I've been, teaching people, that kind of reframing, and I realize that it's hard for people, partly because they themselves haven't reframed their own inner picture. If you see the world, and a lot of us kind of, tend to have part of us that sees the world as kind of like a hostile place where there isn't enough for everyone, and someone's going to get me. And if you've got that, then that's going to be very hard for me to make partnership with you. So you got to go back and rethink that question. I remember it was Einstein, actually, who once said, interestingly enough, that the most important question that any human being can ask themselves is the universe friendly? In other words, because he figured out, if we say the universe is not friendly at all, we're going to arm ourselves to the teeth with atomic weapons. There ain't going to be any life on Earth. But if we think that, there's adversity in the world, there's challenge in the world, don't deny it, but ultimately life's on my side, then you're going to approach people in a very different way. If you trust people, they're more likely to trust you. If you respect people, they're more likely to respect you. If you try to get to yes with them, they're going to try to get to yes with you, and you're going to end up generally doing much better than people think, I don't trust you, then you're not going to trust me, and then, an eye for an eye, we all go blind.
That's great. That's really great. So let's talk about one more of these, I think, beautiful, beautiful steps. And I love this one, which is respect them even if. And tell me why it's such a difficult concession for people to make and doesn't really cost anything. And it's just a wonderful thing to do for someone. What's our hang-up with respect?
Yeah, it's amazing to me. It's like so often in negotiation I find that where things break down isn't around the substance, because there's a substantive thing. It's around issues of it's the feelings, it's the face, and it's basic human respect. And we're such in a rush to get things done nowadays that we don't pause to actually respect the other person, which is, maybe listen to them, acknowledge what they've done. Just those simple actions make a huge difference in negotiation. I've seen so many negotiations where it failed simply because of a lack of basic human respect. And so to me, that's the cheapest concession we can make. It costs us nothing. And it means everything to them because the person's dignity means everything to them. And so, I even think, for example, I've sometimes trained hostage negotiators. These guys who have to deal with hostage situations every day in a city like New York City. What's their number one rule? I remember this big burly New York cop saying, well, my number one rule is be nice, in other words, give some respect to that person, even if they're an armed criminal, and you're more likely to get them to surrender peacefully to the police, and there's not going to be anything. It costs you nothing. And imagine in business, if we could just, if the New York police can show respect to an armed criminal, we can show respect to our neighbor, to our business partner, and so on. And and it's so it costs us nothing. So and the rewards are priceless.
We make these distinctions in business, don't we? We say it's not personal, it's business. It's two different things.
Right.
And you're saying it's not. In fact, to be personal with someone and be respectful of them makes you better at business. Yeah,
because in negotiation, that what I find is the two classic mistakes we make is we say, okay, I'm going to be hard on the problem. It's all business, and if I'm hard on the people, well, that's so may it be. Or some people say, I got to be soft on the people, it's the customer and everything, and then I'm soft on the problem. I just give concessions. No, the secret of negotiation is to be soft on the people, hard on the problem. If you want to be hard on the problem and really solve the problem, you got to be soft. In other words, respectful, listening, dealing with the people. If the people, their emotions and their feelings are not going to get in the way of dealing with the problem. I mean, it's like coming home to your spouse at a long day of work, and so is your spouse, and so on, and you say, "Honey, the house is a mess." Well, they may not hear that as a focusing on the problem. They may hear that as a personal attack. You didn't do what you said you do. You didn't take the kids to school. You didn't take the garbage out. And you get into a huge fight. So often in life, the people get in the way of dealing with the problem. Well, maybe we need to deal with the people first. And the first person we need to deal with is this person right here.
Wonderful. Gosh, I think the strength of getting to yes with yourself, for me, is simple and powerful wisdom through personal story. And tell me about one experience, and there are so many in the book that I love, but tell me about your experience with the Syrian rebel leaders and the lesson it contains for business leaders. I think there's a really good one there.
Yeah, well, my passion is helping people get to yes, and ultimately my passion is peace. More peaceful world. So I've gotten involved a little bit in the conflict, the terrible war going on in Syria, and in the course of that, my colleagues and I went and interviewed a number of Syrian rebel leaders just to find out what is it that they want, And we were right there on the Turkish-Syrian border, and we did 20, 30 interviews. But the last interview we did was with a guy who, was like the archetypical, our Western stereotype of a terrorist. He's kind of a Muslim fundamentalist. He had the beard and everything like that. And so, you can watch your prejudices, work. And then I was interviewing him, and I said, so how did you get into this? And he said, well, I was studying university. What were you studying? Poetry. You're a poet. Oh, yeah, and I come from a long line of poets. And then he proclaimed some poetry and whatever. And, then I said, well, if you survive this, what are you going to do? Oh, my love's in Egypt. I fell in love with her, and we'd like to get together. And it just suddenly became, human. And I said, so what are you most worried about? Let's say you win. I'm worried about the extremists. He said, because, I believe in Sharia law. He said, but I don't believe anyone should impose anything on anyone by force. And I said, so what's the last thing, we're going away to America. Any message you want to bring back to people in the West? He said, yeah. He said, I know, the Syrian war shows up on TV. But just remember, it's just not, it seems like numbers to you, but just remember, every man and woman, child here who's dying, they have a soul. And, it was just a complete transformation. So I was able to put myself in his shoes. And that's the thing in negotiation, is the ability to break through our, the kind of the prejudices, the preconceptions, the lenses, to actually connect with the human being and see if where you can find common ground. And that to me is it's a great challenge in business, it's a great challenge at home with our teenagers.
Absolutely.
Or it's a great challenge in the world, is can we listen to the other human being. It costs us nothing. It doesn't even mean making concessions. It just means understanding as the first precondition to getting to yes with that person.
Awesome. So another thing I love about getting to yes with yourself is that these lessons that you share can be used by everyone in everyday situations. So let's talk a little bit about how someone in business can use it to be more productive. We've covered a few examples, but if you were to summarize what a business person would most get from the book, what's your hope there?
Yeah, my hope basically is that, first of all, this is going to help anyone just long term. But even, let's imagine you have a tough negotiation tomorrow morning, that you might take a look at this book and run through it and say, okay, how can I get prepared for this meeting? How am I going to get myself out of the way so that I'm actually negotiating at my best, my highest performance? To me, the key in negotiation to be able to get the highest performance is to be able to negotiate from a place that I call the balcony. It's almost like you're negotiating on a stage, and part of your mind goes to a mental and emotional balcony overlooking that stage where you can keep your eyes on the prize, unrelenting focus on what's important to you. So if you can go through these steps, it can help you go to the balcony, like really understand what is it that I really want behind the position of what I think I want, the numbers. Right. What is it that what's the equivalent of freedom? What's the deep underlying value that I'm standing for here? If you can go through it and say, who can give that to me, and realize that actually you have that inner resolve, you can actually help yourself do it. You're not dependent on the other. Because the key in negotiation is to care, but not too much. Otherwise, you're too dependent on the client, too dependent on them. But if you can bring that self-sufficiency And that's what the book is about realizing that we actually have much more power inside of ourselves than we think. And if we can convey that, we're going to go in that negotiation tomorrow morning with a lot more confidence, and that confidence is going to translate into a better results.
Perfect. And what about folks who want to make a career change? It's not directly addressed in the book, but the principles are universal, and the learnings can be applied, I believe, to situations where an executive needs to or wants to make a change in their career paths. Any initial thoughts on how one might use this book to negotiate that kind of change?
Well, for sure, because if you're going to make a career change, it's because there's an inner conflict inside you. Are you going to stay there? Are you going to move on? Are you going to go this direction or whatever? Mm-hmm. This book is about how you resolve inner conflicts. It's about, maybe the first step really addresses the whole question of, we all have inside ourselves this inner critic who's always saying, you're going to be a failure. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work, and whatever. That voice gets in the way. Mm-hmm. And so the book is about how to deal with your inner critic, how to disarm your inner critic, and understand yourself better, understand what you really want. What's the prize for you? Why are you making the career change? It's about giving you that sense of confidence and power that, yeah, I can do it. So it's about doing that inner homework that's going to allow you then to, get the job that you want in life.
Terrific. Now, there are many more methods, and we're not, as I said, going to cover them all. They're in the book, and they're laid out beautifully and backed up with amazing, memorable, engaging stories. But I do want to read just a little bit from a part of the book, just to give everyone who's watching us today an understanding of why you wrote this book. And I think this really sums it up for me. In the morning when I look at myself in the mirror, I like to remind myself that I am seeing the person who is probably going to give me the most trouble that day. The opponent who will be the biggest obstacle to me to getting what I truly want. I find it valuable to review in my mind, even for a few minutes, the 6 steps of the inner yes method in order to prepare myself for any challenges that may arise that day. I like to ask myself questions for each step. This process helps me get out of my own way, and I hope it can help you too. And that's why you wrote this book.
That's exactly why I wrote
Wonderful.
the book.
It's an amazing book. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone who picks it up will enjoy it and use it as a guidebook for everyday life and business change and career development and all those great things we want for ourselves, we truly want for ourselves. Bill, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's a real pleasure, Tony, and I wish you much success in getting to yes with yourself and with others.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Bye.